The Sega Dreamcast was Sega's last console before they ended up becoming a third-party publisher and developer, and even though it was their last, it was definitely a console that is a huge fan favorite and left a lasting impression, even though it was only on the, where it has some market relevance for, from like, well, at least here in the North America, from September of 1999 until it was announced that it was being discontinued in early 2001 or so. And even in that short time stretch, it came out with a lot of incredible games that are definitely worth playing. And if anything, the Dreamcast is for me one of the more funner systems when it comes to just having games that are very pick up and play, as a lot of the games tend to be kind of more kind of arcade oriented or so. But it still had some other incredible games too, also like some adventure games and all. And it's just a really fun system to explore the library of, as this was also when we first started getting into the sixth generation. And even though technology was advancing so fast, the time when the Dreamcast was out from 1999 to again 2000, early 2001, it definitely gave us a glimpse of the future of what not only graphics would be like, but also just overall presentation and just the scope of games. And it was truly an exciting time. And so even though it ended up dying out early, it left quite the impression. So I wanted to count down here for my top 10 favorite games on this system. And all of these games here are, I will say that a lot of them ended up getting some kind of a port on later systems. So some of the versions that I'm showing here aren't actually the Dreamcast versions, but most of them you can get them, somewhere else now on some of the modern consoles. So definitely there's some easy, accessible ways to play most of these games here. So hope you enjoy this, and let me know if there's any other games that I might have missed here, or if you have any thoughts about the games that I put on here. Coming in at number 10 is Resident Evil Code Veronica. And so this game here, when it got announced, I remember being really excited, as it felt that the Dreamcast was going to start getting some really solid third-party support, where, Capcom was bringing over one of their main franchises that have started getting a big following with, during the PlayStation 1 era. And so this game here, really, it is kind of more the actual Resident Evil 3, as my understanding was that the actual Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was only actually labeled as part 3 because Sony had, I believe, some kind of exclusivity with Resident Evil, where they had to have like at least the first 3 mainline entries on their system or something to that effect, because Code Veronica feels more grand in scope and feels like the actual part 3, as far as the how things go in the timeline and all. But either way, though, we got the game on the system, and it's pretty good overall. There's some aspects about it that haven't aged quite too well for me, so mainly with some of the characters and dialogue and all. But otherwise, though, it retains the same classic survival horror gameplay, where it's still set in fixed camera angles, even though now everything is in polygons now. And so this did give the developers the ability to pan the camera around a little bit more, give it more dramatic camera angles, as things can actually be moved now in the backgrounds instead of just having static shots. And so that made for some pretty cool cinematic moments. And overall, a pretty good game that expands more on the overall Resident Evil lore. And even though, again, with some certain bad choice in characters that they have in this, it's still a pretty fun game overall, and a bit longer too than the ones on the PlayStation. So definitely worth playing. But then coming in at number 9 for me, I have Hydro Thunder. And so this game was a port of the arcade, and as far as I know, I think it looked either as good as, or might have even looked a little bit better than what it did in the arcades. So one thing that you're going to probably see some of the games here, or just if you explore the library of the Dreamcast, is you're going to start seeing that a lot of the games that were on there are games that have like some kind of a background in being in the arcades of some sort. And so that's what makes the Dreamcast a lot of fun to play, is just because even though there's not a whole lot of depth to some of these games, there's still a lot of fun and still hold up incredibly well to this day to play, as the gameplay kind of rules here with a lot of the games here on this system. And Hydro Thunder was no exception, and it was a launch title as well too. And it was definitely very pleasing to the eye, and just a lot of fun with a cool arcade action. And as you go through the levels, and they all seem like almost like as if you're on a Grand Disney ride or so. It just has a lot of cool spectacles and set pieces and all, as you're driving your hovercraft over these just some crazy courses through here, and it just makes the game a lot of fun. And yeah, definitely one of the better racers on the Dreamcast. But then coming in at number 8 for me is Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Now, this game became a huge fan favorite in this series, as it went a little bit different though, where now we have 3D backgrounds, but otherwise the character sprites are the same from what's been done before, but we do have some new characters in here as well. And just the overall roster of this game of how many characters you can play is just immense. And in the Dreamcast version, you get a select few to start off with, and then as you play the game, you earn points which you can spend to buy new characters. And so that gave the game a lot of depth, right, to keep coming back to, as it was always rewarding to see what other characters you can unlock. And just overall a really chaotic game. This time you can choose up to 3 players on your team, and just the hyper combos you can do in this and all is just pretty intense and just makes the game a real blast to play through. And this is all set to probably one of the most cheesiest soundtracks out there, but also strangely one of the best for a fighting game. It strangely goes so well with this game that I can't see this game without this really just whatever kind of pop jazzy music that's going on in the background. But it's so much fun to listen to and just gives the game a very unique identity. And this game was recently re-released on the Marvel Fighting Capcom collection, or I think that's what it's called. But yeah, definitely you can check it out there. But otherwise, the Dreamcast version, if you can get your hands on it somehow, it's still really fun to play and one of the better fighters on this system here. But then coming in at number 7, I have Jet Grind Radio, and truly one of the more unique experiences on this system here. This game, it sort of was taken off of the popularity of some of the Tony Hawk games where, we were getting these extreme sports games, but then it definitely did its own thing here. So as you can see, we have these cel-shaded graphics, which hold up incredibly well. And the overall structure of the game is where you're tagging your rival gangs' territory. And as you start tagging more, or start taking over their graffiti, then suddenly you start getting more and more police after you. And so it can get a little intense as you have a whole bunch of them chasing after you. And the camera can get a little bit difficult to control, or just, kind of keep your player there sort of centered. And also with some of the platforming that it has you do, it can be a little frustrating. But just the overall uniqueness of this, and overall it is a very fun game. It's just it's hard to put down once you really start getting into it, and has just an amazing soundtrack as well too. And I want to say I think the American version had extra songs on it, because I think there was like a song from Rob Zombie in it. But either way though, the music is just really incredible, fits the game like a glove, and it's just has aged incredibly well, and one of the more unique experiences that the Dreamcast had. And this version, I'm playing this one here on the Xbox Live version. But for a while, though, the Dreamcast was the only place to play this game, and was definitely a standout on the system. Just a lot of fun to come back to, and a very unique game for this generation. At number 6, I have Grandia 2. Grandia 2? Sounds like Grandia, but I'm not sure. I'm going to go with Grandia 2. But so here's an RPG that was one of the few that came out on this system here, and was really good though. It took from what was already established in the first Grandia game, that one had come out originally on the Sega Saturn, and then here on the PlayStation. And luckily this one though did get ported over here to the United States for a Sega system, as the first Grandia game didn't. But kind of more or less the same. It's so the RPG, this RPG here, it's a bit linear, but what it really excels in is having a very lighthearted but fun story. It was developed by Game Arts, who they've also done, for example, like the Lunar series, so it has sort of the same tone, sort of, where it's just a bit more of a lighthearted adventure. It's a lot of it's a bit jokey, it's a bit silly, but that's kind of what gives it its unique sort of style to it, as it still has some dramatic moments and all. But when you play this game, you'll have a smile on your face a lot, just because, again, it doesn't take itself too seriously. But another thing that really stands out in this series here is the battle system. So it's like turn-based, and you have this meter there at the bottom, And so it's almost like a race, right? Almost like the ATB gauge, like, who's going to get to the end of the gauge there so that you can start attacking. But you have a few different options once it is your turn to select a command. And so you can do just like a regular attack, or you also have like this critical strike. And so if you can time it correctly, if you do the critical strike at the right time, it'll send the enemy back in the gauge, so that basically deflecting their attack, and so opens up a little bit more for you to go on the offense there. And so knowing when to use that makes for some pretty cool strategy, and definitely keeps the battle system really fun. And even though there isn't a whole lot of exploration in this game or side content, it definitely excels in having just an amazing battle system, and one of my favorite actually turn-based battle systems of any JRPG. But the graphics are pretty nice for the time, and like I said, right, it all has a pretty fun story to it, but can get kind of dark at times too also. And also a really great soundtrack that I could be wrong, but I want to say I think it was from the same composer as the Lunar games. But either way, though, just a great overall adventure and cool cast of characters and some decent voice acting as well too. And the main character is voiced by Cam Clark, who you might know him as Liquid Snake from the Metal Gear Solid games, along with a bunch of other games too. Also, he's done a lot of voices too, but yeah, just an overall a really fun game. And it's I actually just thinking about this game and all, it just kind of makes me want to play it again. It was just a lot of fun. But yeah, again, one of the few RPGs on the Dreamcast, but certainly not for lack of quality though, as this one was pretty impressive. But then coming in at my number 5 favorite game on the Dreamcast is Sonic Adventure. And so for me, Sonic, I've always preferred them more in 2D games. The 3D ones, I've had a bit of a hard time getting into them, but if there was ever one that I really did get into and, played it all the way through and all, it was this one here. Now, a part of it has to do that I was just really mesmerized by the graphics. I thought it was just really incredible to see Sonic going through these 3D stages at a really fast pace and all the very colorful, detailed backgrounds and all. So admittedly, that was a bit of a catch at first, as this was all new to me at the time, but it still holds up fairly well. It's for me, it's just a fun game to play. More specifically, the Sonic stages, because from what I recall, when you start playing the other characters like Tails, Amy, Knuckles, and I think the cat and the robot, I forgot the robot's name, but their stages aren't quite as good from what I recall. But the Sonic ones are definitely fun. And I almost wish that they would have just kept that part of the game there instead of, having you play some of the other stages. But either way, it's a lot of fun, a lot of things to uncover in this game. As if I recall right, I think you have to go through the game all the way and get basically 100% it. Yeah, so you can see the true final last boss, if I remember right. But I remember that boss fight that was pretty incredible with just the overall setup and all it. It's just a big spectacle, and it wasn't quite, I would say, Sonic's Mario 64 moment, but it was still really good though. And it was part of the launch lineup on the Dreamcast, which for me is still the best launch lineup ever of any video game console. And so this game just sort of helped add to that amazing library of games. And yeah, I mean, it was a great game and a good way to, Sonic games in 3D have always struggled a bit, but I felt that this one, right off the bat, out of the gate, it was it left a pretty good first impression, right? That that it would only hope that the future developers, right, will be able to pick up on future installments of Sonic in 3D. But yeah, probably one of the more popular games on the Dreamcast. Definitely worth playing, and just a lot of fun. This version here, though, that I'm playing is also on the one that was on the Xbox Arcade, but just on the Xbox Live there. But then coming in at number 4 for me is The House of the Dead 2. And I had a big blast with this game here when it first came out. I told the story before, but a roommate of mine at the time, him and I used to play this game quite a bit after work, and we just had a lot of fun playing it. And we had the 2 light guns that was out here in North America for the Dreamcast, I believe from Mad Catz, if I remember right. And just a lot of fun. Definitely one of I would say it is my favorite light gun game of all time. And just really nice graphics for the time there, which from what I can tell, this game was pretty much arcade perfect as far as graphics and audio go and all. And really fun, unique bosses. Definitely has a, you know, sort of a, the whole zombies theme and all is really fun and really campy. I mean, if you thought the acting in Resident Evil was bad, this one is even worse. I mean, this game probably takes the cake as far as some of the worst voice acting ever in a video game, but it's part of its charm though too. And it's just, I mean, there's just times where you're just going to be laughing in delight, right, as you're playing through this, and and again, you're just having a fun time shooting zombies and a lot of fun. And nowadays, I mean, it's kind of hard to play with the light guns. There's a version that came out on the Wii, which you can use the Wiimote, which works pretty good actually. And even playing with the controller, I mean, it's definitely not a preferred way to play it, but at least it'll give you a taste of the game, what the game's all about, and it's still kind of fun for that. So. But yeah, House of the Dead 2, just some of the most fun I've ever had in multiplayer, and just a game that I always love coming back to. But coming in at number 3, though, I have Soul Calibur. And Soul Calibur was it was a monumental moment in gaming for me, because Soul Calibur, when people that played it first saw it, it was almost like a turning point, because because we never went really back from here, where it was like, video games can be, they can look better than what they are in the arcades. I mean, this game is significantly better looking than what it was in the arcades. And then not only that, you load it up with a bunch of cool extras and all, and you were just playing this game for months, really, just unlocking all the new characters, all the different things in the museum, all their exhibition theater modes, and it's just so much fun. And because the gameplay itself is really great. It's a sword-based fighting game. So it takes up a little bit, it takes up from where the Soul Edge left off, but improves on a lot of things, and then just being at 60 frames per second, it just feels more smoother and all. Still has great music, incredible graphics, like I said, right? This was a moment where I think we all looked at this game and said, we're really in the next generation here, right? That, we don't need the arcades. This is, we can get this kind of stuff at home. We're good. And it was really impressive seeing this game at home. Definitely one of the more jaw-dropping moments I've ever had playing a game, just because of the visuals, right, of what they looked like at the time compared to what we had before. And like I said, just also a really fun fighting game as well too. But at my number 2, though, I have Skies of Arcadia. Now the Dreamcast, again, the Dreamcast is mainly known for having a lot of cool, fun arcade style games. At least, that's what I feel like it's really known for. But it definitely had some other games, right? And even in the short time frame that it was out, right, it definitely had some games that stood out. And this one in particular is a very great JRPG. And unfortunately, it just seems like it hasn't gotten a whole lot of love, as the Dreamcast, again, for beloved as the system is, it just didn't have a big install base. The game eventually also got ported over to the GameCube, but, not as bad as the Dreamcast, but that system also didn't have a big install base either. But this is just a truly incredible JRPG. It's highly unique, where you play these sky pirates, and so you explore the world in these airships. And I mean, eventually, there's a lot I don't remember on the story on this one, but it does get pretty epic in scope as you're fighting these huge golem-like things in the airships, and the battle system is really fun to play. And the overall stages and islands that you explore, just a lot of fun. In some ways, it kind of reminds me a bit of like the Wind Waker, only a turn-based RPG, and then also you're in the sky as opposed to sailing in the ocean. But still has a bit of the similar vibes though, right? When you go to each island, there's just a lot of fun to explore, and it definitely has its dramatic and epic moments, but it's also very lighthearted too. Also, as you're the two of the main characters of Vice and let's see, the girl there with the ponytails or the pigtails. They're just really funny, and the whole game is just a blast to play. And one that I wish would get re-released at some point, but hopefully, there was rumors about it, but I don't know if we'll ever see this game again. But either way, though, if you find a way to play it, highly recommend it. I want to say I think that some of the staff that made Phantasy Star made this game, so it's definitely a Sega RPG, right? Our Sega RPGs, they have a certain feel to them, and they tend to be more colorful, a little bit more lighthearted and all, but just a lot of fun though still. And yeah, definitely for me, one of the best experiences you can have on the Dreamcast. It's a lot of fun with great music and great, again, battles, a lot of cool magic effects and all, and a lot of cool islands and dungeons and all to explore. Yeah, definitely a great game. But when it comes to best experiences, though, on the Dreamcast, for me, it's gonna be, I mean, this one really, it could be, it's really both of them, Shenmue one and two, because they both kind of play off of each other. But if I'm picking one, I'll go with part two. And Shenmue isn't for everyone. I will say that. If you've never played Shenmue, it's yeah, it's not for everyone. Okay, it's not Yakuza. It's I mean, it might have inspired Yakuza, but it's definitely not that though. This game is much more slower paced. It wants you to live in its world, and by live I mean like literally, like you're asking questions, to a bunch of people walking around. You're like opening cabinet doors and learning martial arts moves, but in a more slower paced way. You're it's wanting you to soak in its environment and even its culture too. So part one takes place in Japan, and then this one in China. And as you're going through the game, it really makes it feel like you're there almost. I feel like I learned a little bit about those cultures that are just playing these games, and they're definitely these games are kind of hard to explain if you've never played them before, because I guess you can say they're like open world, but they're kind of their own thing too. And the game basically centers around where you play Ryo Hazuki, and you're Hazuki, right? I believe is his last name. But you're basically your father gets killed early on in the first game, and so you're on a quest for revenge on finding who your father's killer is and trying to stop him. And eventually, like I said, the first one you go through Japan, and then in this one you end up in China here. And this one varies up the locations more, where you're part of the game, you're in a kind of a city in China, and then eventually you go exploring this walled city that's there in China, which is really cool to explore. And then also the last part of the game I thought was really beautiful. The graphics at the time were pretty impressive, but also not just the graphics, it's just the scenario, what's going on in the story and everything. It was just very peaceful. And it was even though there's again, the gameplay can, I guess you can say, kind of be lacking a little bit, but it's more the experience, because at times Shenmue kind of feels a bit like a walking simulator, um, and combined with like a life simulator. But it does have some combat in it, right? That it's not too bad. But really, I mean, the game is very slow paced. It wants you to just sort of live in this world and all. And so if you can have patience for something like that, I think you'll be rewarded with a really beautiful game that it's trying to teach you its culture, and it's wants you to live in its world. And if you give it a chance, I think you might come out to be highly immersed in this world and just kind of get away for a while, right? To as you partake there in Rio's quest to find his father's killer. But just a very unique experience, if anything, and just something that we don't see too much nowadays anymore. And even though it wasn't quite a hit the way Sega would have thought, as the budget to this game was incredibly high, and probably part of the reason what ended up bankrupting Sega, at least what to the point where they had to go third party. It's still an incredible experience, right? If you're willing to give it a shot. So Shenmue 2 for me, well, this and part one and part two are just my favorite experiences on the Dreamcast. But that's what I got for this system here. Again, let me know if there's any other games that you really enjoyed on this system, or if you have any thoughts on the games that I've covered here. And I will see you in the next one. Have a good one.